So with that in mind, our next speaker is Larry Alford from Lethbridge, Alberta. Larry is a former stockbroker. He had sued his former place of business, and he's got some interesting stories to tell, in particular about the size of what we're facing here in terms of potential or losses or potential losses. Larry?
Well, thank you. I hope this microphone is just fine. You can tell me if that needs to come up or not. My name is Larry Alford, and I've only got 2 jokes to go with my presentation, try to lighten things up a little bit. First joke is I'm here out of a duty to community service. I'm told that if I do 500 hours of community service, do some intensive anger management, and don't steal any cars for 18 months, that I could be qualified to join the Canadian Senate. Very short. So I'm really looking forward to that. And the second joke I'll save for the end of my presentation, and the ironic reason for that joke is we all know we can laugh at the Canadian Senate at this moment, a revered and respected institution. And I think I'm going to give you another institution that you can also question, doubt, and perhaps laugh at. And that's how we will change the problem. I worked 20 years inside the largest financial firms in Canada as a stockbroker. I was about, most of it with RBC and Social McLeod, so I was about as far away from exempt markets as I could get, or so I thought. I left the business after learning a great lesson, and the lesson was that most investment people in North America are highly incentivized to earn greater commissions, even if it means doing harm to you, the customer. And I found that to be very unprofessional. I then learned a really hard lesson. As Don said, I went up the chain of command to ask who would be responsible for this. And I learned that nearly every regulator in Canada, self-regulator, is fully paid by the investment industry. So there's very, very little incentive for them to address any systemic harms. So here lies perhaps the largest financial industry failure, and my particular area of study, my passion is I study people who are in positions of trust who harm their customers. I find it fascinating. It's a social study and a psychological study and an economic thing thrown together. Trusted professionals who are willing to place stumbling blocks in front of the blind, so to speak, in front of trusting and vulnerable customers, or you, the public. When a young man took his own life, a young man from Red Deer, Alberta, due to the harm that the investment industry was willing to do, I was so upset that I set out to make a documentary film to see if I could push for some change. I made a film titled Breach of Trust. The subtitle is The Unique Violence of White-Collar Crime. It's free. It's available on YouTube, the internet, or breachoftrust.ca. The violence of white-collar crime that I witnessed is that victims end up having no one to punish except themselves. Their lives, their careers, their families, they all suffer when you suffer. When the authorities treat financial abuse like it's not really a crime, the regulators and police become apologists because they don't have the system, they don't have the staff, they don't have the budget, they don't have the incentives. Does anyone in here have police or regulators brush aside your crime, your fraud? Anybody know what that feels like? To be brushed aside by the people that you pay to protect you. Well, when a certain class of people, let's say a trusted class, can get away with crimes against you, personally, to me, this feels like any other form of abuse, bullying. Anyone agree with that? That feels like it? Thank you for participating. So financial abuse and bullying, in my experience, can lead someone to anger. And anger can lead to resentments. And resentments can lead to thoughts of revenge and retaliation. And these thoughts ultimately lead, if they have no outlet, they lead to self-defeating behaviors. Anybody feel that way? They lead to behaviors that end up hurting ourselves, hurting our families, anger, frustration, victimization, depression, addiction. self-sabotaging behaviors, maybe a gambling problem, alcohol, pills, suicide. Anyone experience some of that? Know someone? Another aspect of the violence of white-collar crime is that there seems to be no person in authority in Canada who will stand to help you. It's a form of abuse that gets the willful blindness treatment in Canada, and that's very sad. Let's fast forward to now and talk about your financial losses. Can anyone recall what the largest news story in Canada was last year? Any guesses? Shout it out. Close. Good call. No. It was the XL Foods story. The story of tainted beef products being introduced into the food chain. At least it was the largest in Alberta, and I'm told it was one of the largest in Canada. So use your imagination. Go with me for a second here, if you will. What would that story look like if it turned out that the inspectors at the meatpacking plant, if they were on the payroll of the meat packers themselves and not on the payroll of the taxpayer? Would that have changed the story a little bit? And what if those meat inspectors were actually paid or incentivized to look the other way, to turn a willfully blind eye to tainted products? And what if they actually earned fees for letting toxic products be silently sold to consumers? What if they did that? If they were paid to do that? Those are three really big gifts, and none of them were true for XL Foods, but in my view, they all apply to how investments get sold to you, or they get handled by our investment regulators. This image is a web page from the Securities Commission, and I imagine there are thousands of investments that go through the Securities Commission every year. I haven't looked at the total, but I have noticed that the ASCs allow investments which do not meet our laws, do not meet the laws of the land, the Alberta Securities Act, roughly 500 times a year since I started checking in the year 2000. This is a process where the Commission actually accepts fees from a product seller to let them ignore certain laws. Are you feeling comfortable yet? It's almost like the most clever folks in the industry have set traps out for you people to fall into, for everyone, not just exempt market people. I'm very curious to find out if together we can prove that to be true. Are there traps out there that the smartest people in the business and the self-regulators put in front of you? Do they place stumbling blocks in front of the blind to actually hurt your interest? Because that's not what they promise. My experience and my questions asking them to explain suggest they may not even have a process. They may not even have a process to ensure that these exemptions are handled properly. They will not answer. They usually do these exemptions without disclosure to the public, so you may not be aware. Your exempt market securities follow a slightly different process, but I imagine many of you were not even aware of what the key meaning behind the word exempt market investments was. I'm not sure. So one result is that investment sellers in Canada get to dump questionable investments on the public. Toxic meat, if you will. We get to dump it onto members of the public. They get to go around the law. Another result is that billions of dollars of harm is done to investors. You people represent $2 billion of exempt market securities that have been harmed. The other result is the Securities Commission gets millions in fees, and I don't think they should be incentivized to earn millions in fees to let people violate the laws. So let me give you just a few examples of what I'm talking about. And remember, we're backing up a little bit, and this is a bigger picture from my investment brokerage side of things. It's not the exempt market that we've come here to discuss. We're going to zoom out a little bit and see how securities regulators protect you. Let's pretend that a bank, any bank, has an investment product that they're underwriting, and they'd like to sell it to the public. Let's pretend it's not selling very well. Let's pretend it's okay. They are not supposed to dump a poor-selling investment product onto their very own mutual fund customers because they have mutual funds with the bank and they underwrite investments on the other side. There's supposed to be a wall there, separation, right? But when investment bankers get stuck with a poor-selling product that they can't unload, they can go to the Securities Commission and ask for permission to violate those laws. It allows them to dump the poor-selling investment product over here into the mutual funds of trusting bank customers without a single notice to any of you. And you don't know about this deal that's cooked up between the seller of the tainted product and the securities regulator. You're the guy whose money is affected. It's your interest, and you've just been sold down the river. That's exemption number one that I see over and over again in the list of exemptions. Here's an image of an exemption document, and I've got another one here, and there's two on every single table at the back room if you'd like to read how simple and sweet 4 pages are to violate the law and make $1 billion. Anybody feel like making $1 billion by filling out a form to violate the law in Alberta? That's how it's done. When a mutual fund company learns that they could earn 16 times more money if they advise all of you trusting people to dump your best quality independent mutual funds and buy the homemade house brand funds. Okay? This exemption document here is for the Asante company, and they did exactly that. They received permission to violate the law against commission rebating or be exempt from the law against that particular protected element. And they were authorized to do just that. And they convinced millions of customers to put tens of millions of dollars into their own house brand funds, which had double the amount of fees, and sometimes half the performance of an independent fund. So the dump truck analogy in the other one is just as good an image, because securities commissions that I've seen are very heavily staffed with lawyers. They don't seem to spot these tricks of the investment trade. An investment dealer, manufacturer, mutual fund company can come to them, write up an exemption application, and they will stamp it just like an Alberta License and Registry Office. They're really just paper pushers from my experience. If I go to number 3 example, is when $35 billion of subprime toxic mortgage product needed to be dumped in the Canadian market by bankers and investment people who were stuck with it. The securities commissions of 13 provinces and territories were there to give them an exemption. Here's one in the back of the room, Bank of Montreal securities exemption. You can read it. Gave them permission to sell $35 billion worth of subprime mortgage product, which did not meet our laws. I can't imagine that being done in the meat business or the television or selling business, but $35 billion was cheated out of Canadians for products that didn't meet our laws. The Public Service Pension Plan of Canada was cheated out of $2 billion alone. That's the pension plan that looks after retired judges and RCMP officers, postal workers. It begins, as I look at these things, it begins to look and feel like a government regulator that has helped bring harm to every Canadian, and who's helped transfer billions of dollars into the hands of lawyers and financial people. The really cool factoid I wrote down here, securities regulators were paid to give exemptions to the law, so $35 billion gets lifted from consumers, and then the regulators give them a very, very stiff fine 2 years later. It's half a penny for every dollar taken. The fine is half a penny for every dollar taken. It's on one of the tables on the far right here. And usually, when the regulators find someone, usually they keep the money. They didn't in this case, because there was such an outcry on social media that they paid back some investors. But usually when they find someone, 140 or 170 million, whatever the number was in this case, and it's on that table, usually they keep the money. They get paid twice. They get paid to let these people exempt the law through collecting the fees, and then when they find them half a penny, and say, boy, did you guys ever do something bad? They usually get to keep those fines as well. It's like they're running a business within a business. Alberta Finance, there's a $35 billion fraud charges in the U.S. for Wall Street brokers for subprime fraud. Certainly didn't see anything like that in Canada. What we actually had in Canada was the judges granted immunity from civil prosecution to the very people who lifted $2 billion out of their pension plans. That is how good and how clever the financial industry is at putting traps in front of people's money in Canada. So there's a few thousand, this lady is a sister of a Calgary woman who took her own life said earlier, we know of more suicide victims in Canada for financial crime than we know of high-level prosecutions in Canada. There's a few thousand other examples. I'm not familiar with them all, and I'm not going to name them all here, but just imagine some of the names that I'm going to list here, and ask yourself, why would our Securities Commission allow these companies to skirt the law? JP Morgan, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, WorldCom, Enron, Lehman Brothers, Concrete Equities, etc., etc., etc. This list is from Alberta Finance. It's the third finance minister I had written to, from Iris Evans to Ted Norton to, I can't remember the other one, claiming that they allowed at least 20 companies to exempt the law in the case of taking the $35 billion out of Canada, and yet they will do nothing about it. They are in the see no evil mode. The common denominator in all of these financial abuses of the public, in all of these robberies, I call them, two things. One is an investment firm that needs to help themselves by doing something which is not allowed under our laws. And two is a Securities Commission which is incentivized to collect fees by making this happen. Pay us and we can make this happen. We can wave a wand and we can make the law go away, using their magical powers of discretion. So back to the food inspection analogy. Imagine a food inspection agency being incentivized to allow harm to the consumer. I've watched the ASC in action now for about 30 years, since 1984, and that's exactly what I see over and over and over again, thousands of times. I see them acting contrary to the public interest and harming investors repeatedly. I don't see a reason for it. I would submit that if the Alberta Securities Commission was running your Canadian Food Inspection Agency today, you'd all be eating tainted meat. IKEA's the news on IKEA on the way up here was that they had horse meat in IKEA's products in Europe, not in Canada, but in Europe. It was on CBC News. Some inspector let that in. That's exactly what's happening with your investment products over and over and over and over again. Your bank mutual funds, your exempt market products, everything. This has to stop, ladies and gentlemen. In my opinion, some of you investors never stood a chance. Okay? You've got the cleverest people and the regulators and 1,000 lawyers standing up, working harder to help the investment industry than they're working to protect you. Top 10 warning signs, not, I guess 9. Top 9 warning signs, and I'm getting close to a wrap-up here for those watching at home, to indicate really bad practices given to you by government regulators. Number 9, the top man in the securities industry is being paid 3 or 4 times the salary of the premier of your province. In this province, he earns $721,000 plus pension obligations. The top 4 executives at the ASC earn combined salaries of just over $2 million shared between them. Our premier only makes $211,000. Ask yourselves why that is. Number 8, the top investment inspection person is a lawyer and not an investment expert or a consumer advocate. Number 7 reason, this investment agency appears to favor lawyers more than people with actual investment experience in their staff. Number 6, the rules allow them to give out permissions to violate the law. I've pounded that one to death for a fee. Number 5, the actual wording they put on most of the approvals is this, and it's in blue on the 3rd page on the documents at the back. Here's what they've given me for an answer. This is all I've got from Bill Rice and 3 finance ministers. Each of the decision makers is satisfied that the test contained in the legislation for the decision maker to make the decision has been met. Case closed. I'll do it again. Each of the decision makers is satisfied that the test contained in the legislation that provides the decision maker with the jurisdiction to make the decision has been met. That should be a joke right there. I heard somebody chuckling. That's almost a Canadian Senate joke, is it not? Come on, work with me here. Number 4 is to allow no public input on whether such exemption can be granted. There's nothing in the Act that says the public can have any input. Number 3 is to give little or no public notice of most of the exempted products being sold. I get more notice from my municipality if I'm going to build my fence a little too close to your garage than I am if I wish to steal $1 billion or cheat you out of $1 billion in the financial industry. Number 2, the products in the investment industry somehow do not have to meet any consumer protection laws in Canada. They are above the laws in that area. And a third joke here might be, perhaps they've been exempted. Never mind, tough crowd. The number one indicator that you could be harmed by government regulators is that the criminal code is not often, I won't say never, but not often applied to activities which happen under the Securities Commission, and almost certainly never to systemic abuse of the public. The police do not seem to get involved. I thought I had an image of policemen here, but I don't. Sorry. So any abuse by clever design, the police are not going to be invited. Now, a quick talk about exempt market products, and I'm just about closing here. Exempt market products are the latest flavor of the month version of cooking the law to allow harm to the public. They seem to have come along more recently, and by all appearances, many of the commissions were making up the rules as they went along. This article in the Vancouver Sun is illustrative of that, and this is one of the reasons why I believe they owe you your money back. They owe you some money back at the regulator level. In this Vancouver Sun article from 1 month ago, the author points out how Western securities commissions failed to put into place protections for the public. Other securities commissions put them in, but we didn't out west. They owe you an apology for not informing you of this. They owe you some of your money back for some of these sloppy deals, and not warning you when people they knew were filing bad deals showed up time and time and time again to sell another junk investment product that didn't meet the prospectus requirements or the securities laws or whatever they needed exemption for. Why do we have to stand here as concerned citizens and tell you these things when there are 4 people at the ASC earning $2 million, 4 people sharing a $2 million salary to protect you, and where are they? It's insane. Get angry, ladies and gentlemen, demand your money back if you were led to believe that they were protecting you. I know of 4 other victims groups who got very angry, and they got very organized, and they got millions of dollars back in Canada. It can be done here. The other 3 were in Quebec, and 1 came out of this very city, Calgary. So, my name is Larry Alford. I want you to get your money back if you have been cheated or harmed by persons in positions of trust, whether it be a financial person or a regulatory person. I don't accept that you're totally to blame for your investment misfortune. There are many people in positions of trust who are setting traps for your money, even government people who are helping them set those traps. All it takes is for victims to stand up and do something to make it happen. On the back of your handout, there are some suggestions on how you can stand together with us and make a great deal of noise. And my closing line is the second joke that I promised you. Guy walks into a bar, and the bartender says, "What do you do?" And he says, "Well, I'm from the Securities Commission, and I'm here to protect you." Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.